Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Eric Devin and Jeremy Smith. Liga is back after the short international breather, but who is right back into their stride and who's still waking back up after a little rest? All of that and more after the latest headlines. Nice made it 2 wins in a row as Patrick Vieira's side won 2-1 against Rennes in the early Friday night matchup. Malang Sarr's own goal put the away side in front, but goals from Alain Saint-Maximin and Pierre-Lys Melou mean Les Aiglons took the 3 points. Paris Saint-Germain prepped for their trip to Anfield this week with a 4-0 win over Saint-Etienne. Despite the absence of the suspended Kylian Mbappe and rested Neymar, the league leaders remain unbeaten in a result that also included the first goal for 19-year-old substitute Mr. Diaby. On Saturday, Lyon scraped an awkward 2-2 draw away to Caen. The home side had a 2-1 lead despite seeing Alexander Djiku sent off, but Ferland Mendy saved a point with a minute to go as Baisama Sanko also saw red late on for the hosts. In the multiplex, Lille survived a late Amiens revival to win 3-2 with Nicolas Pepe netting a hat-trick, while Angers smashed 3 in 18 minutes for a 3-1 victory at Dijon. The other games saw 2 1-all draws, with Libo Motiba scoring in added time to earn a point for Strasbourg at Montpellier, while Aaron Leia Iseka ruled out Yuri Tielemans' strike as Toulouse and Monaco shared the spoils. On Sunday, Reims held Nantes to a goalless draw in a somewhat unnoteworthy affair, while Nîmes continued to entertain as they played out a 3-3 thriller in Bordeaux. In the final game of the weekend, Marseille heaped more misery on pointless Guingamp as a 4-goal salvo in the second half saw them rise to second. A double from Florian Thauvin, Dimitri Payet and Kostas Mitroglou all on the score sheet for the side that are facing Europa League opponents on Thursday. And that's all for the news, but for all the latest in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with Lyon, who continued their frustrating start to the season with a 2-2 draw against an eventually 9-man Caen side, with the Champions League on the horizon as well, which isn't ideal. But focusing on the game at the weekend first, Eric, a bit of a frustrating point.
Yeah, I think that this is sort of how Lyon have been playing to start the season. I mean, yeah, Fekir scored a great free kick, but there's still defensive foibles. There's still a lack of cohesion. Obviously, Memphis was presumably rested for the match at Manchester midweek. He wasn't involved from the start, at least, and it was a frustrating afternoon for Lyon. I think that they're not playing with the same verve and technical ability that they were down the back end of last season. We look at how influential Memphis was, how impressive even Bertrand Traoré was. I think both of those players in particular are a fair way off. I think Fekir had a decent evening, but is still a little bit further away from being his best than I think Bruno Genesio would like him to be. I think that there's been promising signs from Jason Denayer, but I still think that defense needs a little bit of work. And it's just, it's been a lot of the points that Lyon have got this season have been reliant on, a moment of the spectacular. I don't think that they've really offered a comprehensively strong performance yet in any match. And I think that certainly doesn't bode well, not only for keeping pace with the top three in France, but making a fist of progression in the Champions League.
That's the interesting one so far, Jez. Looking at the games they've had, it's not like they've been playing any real world beaters yet. I mean, they've got 2 okay wins against Amiens and Strasbourg, but they struggled against Reims away from home with a 1-0 loss. They obviously had that one just before the international break where they went down to Nice, but at the same time, this one at the weekend feels even a sort of a separation from that. I mean, they obviously went ahead, but then Claudio Bovu pegged them back just after half time, and then they went down to 10 men with Jiku being sent off, and at the same time they couldn't capitalise on that. They went behind again, and it took a late strike from Mendy to really save them. Are you a little bit worried about the form they're going into, especially as we're heading into the sort of the more? Well, we've had the initial part of the season. We're going into European football now. There's more competitions on the way. Are you a little bit worried about how they can continue to fight on several fronts?
Yeah, I am. I mean, they say that form's temporary, class is permanent, and they've got enough decent players there that you can't, you imagine that at some point they might click, but by the time that happens, the rate they're going, they could really be playing catch up in Ligue, in Champions League. They've got a tough draw as it is. Certainly, the first match against Man City, who were already purring, and Lyon really struggling to find form. It could, by the time they do click, if they do, it could well be too late. And I've always thought Genesio got a little bit too much stick. I know, after a World Cup summer, often things are disrupted. But the fact is that Fekir is the only player that was really away for a long amount of time during the summer, and he really didn't have a rest. And as important as he is to Lyon, I don't think it's any exaggeration to say he is their most important player, and sort of got them out of a few binds the last couple of years. There should be enough other players there who've had a decent rest, who, irrespective of the formation that Genesio puts them out in, should be performing better. So I think there's probably a mixture of issues there. I think there's possibly a couple of players who maybe are sulking after not getting the news that they may have wanted in the summer. There's, looking at Ndombele playing in a two-man midfield at the weekend. I don't think he looked as comfortable as he does in a three-man midfield. So there are mitigating circumstances at times, but Genesio being a coach who's been there a while now, and these players being top-class players, they should be adapting, and it should be happening quicker than 5 matches in. And on top of that, as you said, not exactly the most difficult 5 matches to open a season with either.
It gets even more awkward looking ahead of things, because it's not just the Champions League game where you're going away from home against Manchester City, who look in great nick yet again, Eric, but also looking even slightly ahead of this because of this result again, where they've drawn yet again. It leaves them at the moment 7th in the table, but there's a very important Ligue 1 game coming the weekend after as they host Marseille. It's coming thick and fast. Are you a little bit worried about how the team will balance ahead of these 2 games, thinking that obviously, like you mentioned, Depay was possibly rested for the midweek game, but there's another one coming up? How do they balance these next 2 games coming up then? Do they throw everything they can at Manchester City? Do they maybe try and play a more defensive display and maybe hold some of the players back for Marseille? How does Genesio balance this one?
I think it's honestly difficult to say, because we do know that in the past, last time Lyon were in the Champions League 2 seasons ago, Genesio wasn't afraid to experiment tactically. I remember him playing a 3-5-1-1, for example, and some other very interesting formations as he sought to balance injuries and playing against, I believe that was Juventus and Sevilla in that group. Lyon didn't progress, but they did end up with the Europa League final. But Genesio, I don't think that there's a way that this team is currently constructed have the personnel to play more negatively, to play more defensively, to try and limit City. And we've seen, I think, from City's performances, that playing a more attacking style is the best way to get at them. I think that he needs to have all hands on deck and play a strong squad. I'm not sure if Moussa Dembele is eligible for the Champions League, but I think that probably playing a 3-4-1-2 with, a 4-3-1-2 with Aouar in midfield and Fekir behind. I would say probably Depay and Traoré, or maybe Terrier, makes the most sense to not limit any chances that Lyon might have. I think that particularly Fekir and Depay, those 2 players more than more than any players, I would say probably in Ligue 1, aside from maybe those at PSG, maybe well, seeing the Marseille result from tonight, I think we'd add Payet and Thauvin from that to that as well. But they're the type of players who can change a match on a knife edge. So, maybe this is a match that Lyon lose 2-1, but by keeping it respectable, that allows them to say better Shakhtar Donetsk results at the Etihad and allows Lyon to progress on by some narrow margin. So I think that Lyon need to be attacking. Genesio needs to put out his players that can be a catalyst and affect change in this match, and pull off a moment of magic. Maybe it's at the risk of not being as defensively sound as they perhaps could be, but I think that there really is no other option. I think that Lyon need to stick or twist, but what's the point of finishing third in this group for another Europa League campaign? Looking at the teams that are in there, do you really expect Lyon to do that? I think you've already got Chelsea and Arsenal. You're probably going to have at least a couple more teams dropping in that are of immeasurably higher quality than Lyon. There's no point in hoping for third. I think the progression and having an all-out attack to try and get a result at City, foolish as that may seem, is really the best option here for this team.
And that's the funny balancing act of this one, really, Jez. Do you think that some teams have had success sort of pressing Manchester City and being a little bit more open, but at the same time, that's quite an easy way to get cut to ribbons by that kind of team as well. And with Lyon, maybe not on the highest of confidence in knowing that every point will count in this group with two other very difficult sides for them to face, do they risk going for something like that, or maybe do they try and play a little bit more defensively? I know it's not something they're really known for, but is that worth the risk? Is the reward worth that kind of risk?
I suppose it depends if they're going to kind of say to themselves, you know what, we don't care about goal difference. We'll just sort of, rely on getting the points over the other teams that will finish ahead of them. I do think it's a group that they could come out of. I think they could just as easily finish third or fourth. I think, with the exception of Man City, I think that the three other teams are reasonably similar in Stanford. But certainly Lyon should, I think, have the class to get through if they get their game together and they play like the Lyon of the end of last season rather than the one that started this season. So, no one wants to be sort of really put to the sword and embarrassed like that, especially on the European stage. But on the basis that I do think that they are that their attacking players are a lot more talented, let's say, than their defensive players. If they want to play to their strengths, I think they should go on the attack, even though there's a chance that it could work out against them. I suppose either way, if you're going to go down, you might as well go down with glory. But I can't see them being tight enough at the back to sort of frustrate City and come away with a 0-0 draw or seeking some kind of win. So they might as well go for it, and hopefully they get their results against the other teams that, if they do come away with a 3-0 defeat or something like that, it won't matter when it comes down to it.
Absolutely. Let's get the perspective from the other side of things. And joining us for the Manchester City sort of side of this game is Sam Lee of Goal.com. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Great to have you on. Let's chat about City then. And they've been pretty great to start the season, as they were last season. Pretty impervious at the weekend against Fulham. Managed to rest a couple of players. What's their attitude heading into this fixture on Wednesday night?
Well, I mean, as I'm sure you can imagine, the reaction to the draw in general was it could have been much worse. You look at like who United have got, who Liverpool have got. There's a lot of tricky ties. Of Spurs, obviously, City have obviously got the kindest draw of the English teams in the Champions League. And regarding this game, there's no major build up. It's obviously Fulham and the teams that City have played so far are have got certain aspirations in the Premier League, maybe mid-table at best, and genuinely not to do a disservice to Lyon from my point of view, but the build up to the Lyon game is nothing out of the ordinary. It's like another game against the likes of Fulham or or Newcastle. Basically, it's a game that City are expecting to win. And again, maybe that does do a disservice to Lyon in terms of the preparation for it. But given how good City are, given the general reaction to the group as a whole, it's it's not necessarily seen as the toughest game. And also tied into that is, as I'm sure you probably spoke about before, or it's gone unsaid, the usual kind of English apathy or just general disinformation about foreign leagues and European teams that aren't Barca, Madrid, Bayern Munich, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's pretty low key build up.
Do you? Oh,
Derek.
sorry.
Go ahead, Eric.
Do you see? I mean, have you seen much of Shakhtar Donetsk? I mean, do you perceive yourself? What's the perception? Is Lyon or Shakhtar seen as more of a threat to City, or who's the favorite to come second, I guess, in your opinion?
Well, this is it. Last year, obviously, Shakhtar were in City's group as well, but Napoli were obviously seen as the main threat and didn't go through. So this year, it's kind of like, well, they managed to see off Shakhtar last year pretty comfortably at home. The last game was a dead rubber, and now people are seeing maybe Lyon as not as good, or maybe not as well suited to playing City as Napoli were, because obviously with the Sarri approach last season, Napoli, they had their own merits to take the game to City and kind of play them at their own game. So even so, there's, well, certainly the feeling I've got, there's not really been much attention on the Champions League at all so far, because it's kind of as if they're already through to the last 16. So it's taken as read that City will go through, and there's not really a feeling of, oh, this team will be particularly difficult, or this team will most likely finish second if City are to top the group or anything. Honestly, so far, all the attention has been on the Premier League and starting the season as well as possible. And it's like, right, okay, now we've got the Champions League, and it's almost as if we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's that strange sort of former Barcelona mentality, isn't it? Where when they got into that kind of rhythm under Guardiola, that it almost seems like a natural. And much to that, Sam, is the tactics we'll sort of expect from Manchester City. We kind of already know how they'll play. They sort of impose themselves on others. But what's the best way for other teams to get to Manchester City this season? We've seen Wolves obviously take a point when they played them at Molineux, but at the same time, Fulham play in a very similar style and didn't really lay a glove on them at the weekend. Is it better to be more conservative, or is it better for someone like Lyon, who play to their strengths, of trying to go at City and seeing if they can take them toe to tail?
I mean, it's difficult, obviously, either way. And I mean, I could talk for a long time about the Wolves game, but I don't really think that's what your audience is here for. But the thing with the Wolves game is Wolves did play well, and they were a bit more adventurous than you would have expected of other teams in a similar situation. But at the same time, as while City weren't at their best, they did create a lot of chances, etc., on another day. Probably deserved to win. And I think Wolves' performance was very good, but at the same time overrated. But to go back to basically Lyon's best bet last season, Napoli, obviously, and Shakhtar, they both took the game to City at the Etihad. And Shakhtar were much better in the first half. In the first 45 minutes, they did very well, but they tired and couldn't really live with it, and City picked them off. Napoli looked like they were out of it, but kind of got back into it a bit at the end, and that was again by playing their own football. Feyenoord just kind of, I mean, they're out of the equation, really. They were just kind of fodder. So for Lyon, I wouldn't be surprised, and I mean, for what it's worth, I would probably advocate doing what Shakhtar and Napoli did last year, and just take the game to City and not wait, because if you sit back, all the evidence this season suggests, and last season, of course, that City will score eventually, and then what are you going to do then? Are you going to come out and then you try and get a goal? It's even more dangerous, isn't it? And it's kind of, you may as well play to your strengths and go for it and see what happens, because if you sit back and wait, you got a good chance you know what's going to happen. You'll probably lose anyway.
Yeah, it has to be one of those displays where you're playing 100 odd minutes, almost perfect football to stop teams that are playing like that. Before I let you go then, Sam, let's get a prediction what you think the score will be on Wednesday.
Well, bearing in mind how City got on against the teams last year, that did go for them, They were pretty close games. So I do expect City to win. 2-1 to City, I think, because they were good winners against the teams I mentioned last season, but in the end the scoreline was actually quite close. So yeah, 2-1 with potential for 3-1 if they were a bit more clinical than they were at the weekend, which I know sounds silly because they did score 3, but they weren't particularly clinical.
It always feels like that when you're watching Manchester City at the moment.
Yeah, it's really difficult to explain what they're going to do. And in terms of the tactics, just a quick one on that, they've tried new things in every game. Obviously, Mendy was out at the weekend, so they went back to that normal 4-3-3 from last season. But before that, it had been completely different in every game. New things. The 2 home games. The first one, they left all the fast wingers on the bench. So if you think the bench was Sterling, Sane, Mahrez, I can't remember who else. So, but they were all on the bench, and everybody who played was basically a technical player. Played through the middle. They picked their way through the middle. The next game, there was odd for a Guardiola team. There wasn't too much in the midfield at all, and he basically played 4 up front. So you never quite know what you're going to get, and obviously that will have a bearing on the result as well. But it should be an interesting game.
Yeah, they've got an embarrassment of riches, haven't they? Really, that they can sort of pick what they like when they want to. Thank you for joining us, Sam, and good luck for Wednesday, and enjoy the game.
No problem, lads. You too. Thank you.
Cheers. On to other matters then in Champions League, because there's 2 more French sides that will be involved. And starting with our current league leaders, Paris Saint-Germain, they steamrolled Saint-Etienne, and I don't know who said that on the midweek, preview show at least, but I think a few of us did. Even with 2 of their best players left to be fresh for that Liverpool game. Jez, 4-0 win. 2 players that get a nice relax before they try and attack Anfield. Is that the perfect weekend for them?
Yeah, I think it pretty much is. It's the first sort of possibly semi-test on paper for PSG this season. Nîmes obviously did give them a real test, but just looking at the teams they've played, you could say this is the first sort of relatively big club who may have given them a bit of something to think about, and basically Saint-Etienne pretty much didn't turn up as they've failed to do for quite a while now, certainly at the Parc des Princes. And yeah, it was pretty much as straightforward as you can get. Got the chance got a chance to see Drachler, who had a good game, even sort of managed to change the tactics halfway through and see him in a couple of different positions. Another youngster, Diaby, got he's sort of taken over from Nsoki and Kunku and grabbing the sort of young player headlines this weekend with his first goal. So yeah, certainly all looks good. And as you said, Mbappe obviously was suspended, and Neymar didn't have a good night's sleep or something on his way back from Brazil. So those 2 will be rested for midweek. So yeah, it's probably as good as it could get. As usual, the only issue for me is, which was shown a little bit during the match, but will, I think, be the main issue in midweek, is this, as usual, the defensive midfield position. And Tuchel said after the match, he's got his team. He knows who 10 of his players are going to be. Doesn't yet know who the 11th is, and a lot of that is, he says, to do with the formation he decides to play. But you have to wonder, there's talk of Marquinhos, who isn't really a central defensive midfielder. Draxler played there a little bit this weekend, did okay, but he's not a defensive midfielder. Diarra is, but it's kind of been semi-retired for a few years now. So, to me, it's still beyond belief that a team aspiring to win the Champions League still hasn't got that position sorted.
And at least we know it's not the goalkeeper that he's stressing about, at least before this one. But it promises to be an interesting game, Eric, against Liverpool on Tuesday night. It's two terrifically attacking teams that have speed and aggression in those areas. You're thinking Mane and Salah for the home side, and obviously the rest of duo of Mbappe and Neymar for the French team. It promises to be an exciting game that might be a bit gung-ho, again, a bit of a midfield battle as well. Do you think, even in the fiery cauldron of Anfield that does love its European nights, that Paris Saint-Germain can get a result?
I would look at this. I mean, we'll probably get score predictions. I would look at this as being maybe a 2-2 draw. I think that both teams can have their foibles in defense, but I think I did wake up early to watch Liverpool Spurs on Saturday, and I was really impressed with Liverpool. I think that, as much as we've looked at their attacking verve and that front three in particular, I think they're also very solid defensively. Virgil van Dijk, I think, continues to impress, continues to improve, continues to be, maybe one can make a case for the best center back in England. And I think with that being the case, that we really need to look at the task as being on PSG. I think that we need to see from this team a level of maturity, of determination, of drive from the likes of particularly Neymar and Mbappe that lives up to the best that we've seen from these players. I mean, we haven't really seen, I think, the best from Mbappe in a PSG shirt consistently. I think that we've seen more from him in a France shirt. But I think that if he can carry that sort of form, how he played in the summer, and how he played, at his best, perhaps going back to his Monaco time in terms of his club football, then I think PSG have certainly a chance. But I think it's going to be really exceptionally difficult for them to get a win. I would say a score draw is probably the best result they could really hope for. I think that this Liverpool side under Klopp just continues to improve, continues to play with, determination and a ferocity rather, that I think is really uncommon and is really a testament to the belief that those players have in what Klopp is setting them out to do.
And they just look much more balanced this season, doesn't it? And that's something that maybe PSG haven't quite got yet. That they haven't really found, like you mentioned, Jez, a defensive midfielder would help round out the team a little bit more. Maybe add a little more depth, especially in these big games. But have they got a left back and right back sorted fully yet? It's a bit of a funny one, really. But let's get some score predictions on this one then, because we do always like our predictions. Jez, what do you think the score will be?
I hate to say it, but I think it could be a comfortable Liverpool win. I'll go 2-0.
And we've already had yours very briefly, at least, Eric. So I'll say that I think that I just fancy Liverpool. I don't know why. I don't really. It feels a little bit dirty coming from my mouth, really, to be fair. But I think maybe a 2-1, maybe to Liverpool. And in fairness, at the moment in the Champions League, finishing second isn't as bad as it used to be, because every team in the competition is not ideal once you get to the knockout rounds now. And a team that are having a little bit more of a struggle, really, is Monaco. Eric, again, so far this season they've been up and down, and it was another middling performance again. They haven't really shown anything since that opening day of the season, and even then it was questionable. To get a 1-1 draw against Toulouse, who have been pretty good to start the season, it's a little bit safer at least, but again, it feels like they're not quite rising to the task yet, and this young side hasn't quite clicked. This player's still coming back from international duty, so maybe they'll use that as an excuse, but it's all in sort of dribs and drabs for them at the moment, isn't it?
Are we talking about Atletico, or are we talking
Monaco?
No, sorry, that was
I'm very sneaky.
I feel like Atletico have had a similar start to the season, so we can get to that. But yeah, I think it's been, obviously injuries have frustrated. You have Jovetic, Golovin, Pellegrini, Falcao, Subasic. There have been a lot of key players have missed time through injuries throughout the season. So I think that there's been frustration in watching this team play, and we could even maybe level the accusation at Jardine that does he know his best 11 from week to week? I think he knows his ideal 11 in a world where all of his players are fit and in form. But I think for the time being, it's really been a struggle for this team. And I think that we're going to see that mirrored in what has the potential to be, a fairly tough group with, an informed Borussia Dortmund and Atletico Madrid, who, are not in form, but who, we've seen, are, as the Europa League winners last season, are still as tough and determined and still the same side that we've seen over the last 5 years under Diego Simeone. So it's going to be an uphill battle for them. And I think that even with injuries, I think that, Adam, our colleague, is writing the long piece for The Guardian this week, and he's certainly going to focus on Monaco's shortcomings in the transfer market, that, they've done so well over the past 3 or 4 years in terms of who they brought in. And I think some of the players they brought in this summer have looked good. Aoulou, I think, has looked good. Ait Benasser, coming back from his loan spell at Caen, has looked impressive as well. But I think that there are now significant holes in that team, significant areas that need depth and need reinforcement. I think that the club have failed to address, and I think those chickens are coming home to roost for Monaco this season. I had tipped them to finish 5th at the beginning of the season, and I think that still seems reasonable for me. They're not even factoring in injuries, they're really not playing with the level of attacking nous that we would want to see from a team that have brought in that caliber of player this summer, even with their departures.
And this is the thing at the moment, and especially going into the game on Tuesday, just that they've seemed disjointed. They've got a really young side again, as they tend to have, but probably even more so than in the last couple of years, really, especially at the weekend. There was a lot of young players in that team starting and even coming on as well. The game comes again with injuries against an Atletico side that are rough and ready, and they're not one of those tests you really want for a young side against a physical and a team that demands a lot from you when you're playing against them. It feels like one of those games that Jardim will just want to get out of the way, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you could say that about a lot of the first few matches for Monaco's season until he sort of beds in his team or his squad that he wants to go forward with. And obviously it was his choice to stay there this summer, but I do feel sorry for him in that even more than previous years, I feel like this is a completely revamped squad. Maybe bigger, but a lot younger as well. And certainly a lot of the signings from this summer, I don't think it was even in anyone's thinking that they're going to feature much this year. But even some of the others who have got a few games behind them, they're still very, very raw. And to chuck them in, I think we've seen even in Ligue isn't that easy, but certainly to chuck them in the Champions League is going to be particularly difficult. And I think probably Atletico Madrid was maybe as bad a draw as Monaco could have sort of wished for or dreaded, because I think they're exactly the kind of team that will sort of relish playing a sort of green team like Monaco, really being able to kind of bully them with all the dark arts that we know that Simeone's teams are masters of. And as Eric said, Atletico haven't had a great start to the season either, but I think this match probably falls well for them and particularly badly for Monaco. At least if it had been a couple of matches down the line, maybe Jardim would have been able to work his magic a little bit more and worked out what his starting 11 or even starting sort of 16 is, and just had a few of these players, even off the pitch, maybe with another international break or whatever, just having more opportunity to play together and develop sort of relationships. But as things stand, a lot of the team don't know each other. I think Subasic is a massive, massive miss. Benalio did okay at the weekend, but both in terms of pure goalkeeping ability and in terms of leadership and having that strong voice and strong personality behind you, I think they're really, really missing Subasic. And yeah, I think possibly this is the worst team. If you had to hand pick the worst team in the world for Monaco to face right now, I think it would probably be Atletico.
And that's the problem, isn't it? And we'll get into the prediction really of this one, Eric, as well. I know, obviously, if you want to mention Atletico start the season, because it's been a bit indifferent for them as well. But as Jez mentions, with the experience they have, it's probably an ideal one for them to be facing, rather than a Monaco side who is also struggling, but trying to embed a lot of young players.
Yeah, I mean, Atletico, last minute equalizer at the weekend against Eibar, losing to Celta Vigo. Obviously, their own involvement in the World Cup in the form of, well, Tame Lamar didn't play, but Lucas Hernandez, Antoine Griezmann, these players coming back to full fitness is certainly going to have an effect on them. But I think we've seen that it's the quality of this side. I mean, we look at Saul. I mean, a player I can't praise highly enough in terms of his evolution. And Thomas Partey has been improved as well. I think that there's just going to be too much, even with Atletico's uneven start to the season, I think that we can lay that at the feet of the participation of certain players in the World Cup. And I don't think that there's going to be much to worry about for Atletico come the end of the season. Obviously it's still the title that some had pointed to, with the acquisitions that they made over the summer, probably isn't going to come off given Barcelona's start to the season. But I think that Atletico are more than a match for Monaco, and I would look at them again, not being the greatest attacking side, but probably a 2-0 win for Atletico come this midweek.
Jess, what do you think?
I'll try to be a bit nicer to Monaco, and I'll say 1-0 because to Atletico, I mean, that's all they'll need. So probably score that one goal and then shut up shop.
It's a bit of a classic Atletico scoreline as well, really. A solid 1-0. I think that sounds around about what we'll get from Diego Simeone's men. On to teams now who will be playing on Thursday night, and starting with tonight's victors in Marseille. They heaped more misery on a gang-up side that they can't get out of their own way at the moment, really, it seems like. Jez, but at the same time, for them now, with the confidence they've got so far from the season, they're second in the league at the moment. They've got that top four sort of bandwagon off of them at least anyway. But a tough trip, really, in the midweek. It's not the easiest, really, of Europa League games you would expect against an Eintracht side that they were good last season and have been decent to start the season at least. How do they balance the two competitions, though, now? Obviously, they got all the way to the final last year. Is that something they'll be looking forward to again, or is this maybe their secondary focus with Ligue in their sights and Champions League football next season?
I think it's got to be their secondary focus. Certainly at the start of last season, I don't think any Marseille fans would have been expecting to reach a European final. So I think that was a bonus for them. And, as fantastic an occasion as it was for them and a great run, I think they were a little gutted at the end of the season to just miss out on Champions League places. So I think that has to be the priority. And I guess on the basis that they just missed out on Champions League qualification, and I guess in a sense, just because they got to the final, even though they were outplayed in the final, just missed out on winning the European trophy. It doesn't take that much more to sort of take the next step in both. So in theory, they should be looking to do well in both and to get that Champions League place and to still have a good European run. But I think realistically, I think Europa League is getting stronger and stronger. As Eric said earlier, that there will be strong teams coming down from Champions League. I think they have to be thinking in terms of qualifying for the Champions League, just partly because it's sort of less dependent on luck of the draw, as the Europa League will be to an extent, and partly because it's a club that is aspiring to greater things, to becoming the best or at least second best club in France again. They have to be looking at Champions League qualification. They should really have qualified last year. They certainly should this year. Even more so when you look at the stuttering start that Lyon and Monaco have had, which we've already spoken about. Obviously, the qualms that you could have are that I think they haven't particularly strengthened their squad and that they're still lacking, particularly up front, which sounds weird after a 4-0 win, but arguably it was slightly flattering and it was at home against the rock bottom team. So, still a very good squad and definitely should be pushing for Champions League this season. But at the same time, it would be a big disappointment if they don't get out of their European group.
And that's the trouble for them at the moment, Eric, because again they've got some great results so far, but squad depth was an issue last season and they've not really added to it at all this season. So has Rudy Garcia got the flexibility to even try and rotate, or maybe throw some of the players like Katalakara or Radjanic into things to try and get them more game time, or is it a case of maybe this one will be, even though obviously getting out of the group will be still important to them, that they may be the secondary focus this season?
I think so. I think you rightly mentioned that there is a good amount of depth in this Marseille side, more so than last year. But I think that, his options down the back end of last year were severely limited with regards to rotation. I think, we can probably pin Dimitri Payet's injury on that. We can look at Florian Thauvin as being exhausted, having played I think he missed some time with an injury down the back end of last season, if I recall correctly, as well. And I think that, again, like you say, Frank McCourt, since taking over this team, has never been anything less than very clear about where he sees Marseille's place. There's a piece in the New York Times by Roy Smith that ran today or yesterday, speaking about McCourt's ambitions with this club, that he truly views Marseille, given their history, having won this competition, the Champions League rather, in 1993, as perhaps the last great European club that could be had for a reasonable sum of money. And his initial approach to him from Aero was not something that he thought would evolve into ownership. It has, but I think that he really views consistent participation in the Champions League at the expense of Monaco, at the expense of Lyon, whoever it may be this season that provides that competition down the stretch. That is the priority, and I think that Rudy Garcia is under no illusions. I think that last season the priority was, again, this is a incredibly unique circumstance. Marseille weren't expected to progress. They were certainly helped by the draw that they had, not having to face, I think, any real top caliber opposition until that final. But I think that at this point in time, the focus has to be in Ligue. Give a run out to some of the players who perhaps have been brought in, who are perhaps a little bit younger, and can have a chance to establish themselves and impress. I mean, we would look at likes of Maxime Lopez. I think a player who has suffered a little bit under Garcia in terms of his getting playing time, but also you've got two decent right backs in Hiroki Sakai and Bunassar. There's a chance to rotate there. You've got Research, you've got Boubacar Kamara. I think that there's a fair amount of opportunity for some of these younger players. Clinton Algy, there's a fair amount for some of these players to remain in Garcia's plans in terms of establishing themselves as viable options by performing well in the Europa League. I think there's a chance for motivation for some of these players as well. So even if he does rotate, I think getting out of the group round of 16 quarterfinals, probably will come to pass, so long as Garcia doesn't see that as potentially affecting their ability to continue to compete in the league.
Yeah, absolutely, and it'd be interesting to see how they get on as well against a decent side. Frankfurt always tend to give teams a good game. On to the other two teams, and we'll sort of a little bit quicker on these ones at least. Anyways, let's sit through because we are running out of time. On to Rennes for yourself, Jez. They will be disappointed with the result they got this weekend with the 2-1 defeat, despite going ahead, albeit fortuitously, at least anyway, with Hatem Ben Arfa now in tow. But they've been wanting European football, and a lot of teams that do want to do that obviously want to try and do as much as they can in terms of at least progressing a little bit. Otherwise, what's the point, really? in more honest terms, and they face a relatively unknown team in Jablonec. They have to hope that maybe a couple of changes here and there, but a game they should be winning and get their group off to a good start.
Yeah, a little bit like what I was saying about Atletico, but even more so obviously because they're at home. This is an ideal start. It is a bit of an unknown team, but you'd certainly expect Rennes to get the win, and that would be perfect for them. I think that it's always a difficult balancing act. And as you said, it's been a frustration year after year that French teams work so hard to qualify for the Europa League, and then they sort of chuck any chance of doing anything away in order to concentrate on getting a Europa League place. And it all seems a bit circular and a bit silly at times. So Rennes, having been away from Europe for so long, there is still that balancing act. They still will want to make sure that they stay in the European places, and I really think have a reasonable outside chance of even challenging for the Champions League places. So they need to find that balance somehow, but I think they've got a good deep squad this year. I mean, they've had a deep squad for the last few years, but I think this one is possibly there's more strength in depth. So I think Lamouchi certainly has the chance to rotate a little bit more without sort of losing anything in terms of quality. I'll be nice about Ben Arthur and say that in someone like him, they've got a potential match winner on his day. I don't really believe what I'm saying, but we can hope. And yeah, this is the ideal way for them, hopefully, to start on what hopefully could be a good European run.
Yeah, they have to hope that if they want to progress, at least anyway, they need to get results in games like this, because otherwise they are going to really sort of be behind things. And then when you're trying to play catch up, it all starts running up on you, at least anyway. And another team that's going to have an interesting group, and in all honesty, they're facing their easier game first again. Eric, is Bordeaux, who had to Slavia Prague this week. The other two teams in their group, it's Copenhagen and more established opponents, and in Zenit as well, seem like the more difficult ties in this one. So it's important, even though they are away from home, and they had an interesting game at the weekend as well, where they scored 3 but did concede 3. So it's taken with both pinches of salt, really. But they do need a result in this one still, because of that depth in that group. And interesting that it won't be as easy as they think it might be, but it is important for them to get off the mark here.
Yeah, I mean, some really lovely moments from Bordeaux today. Jimmy Briand breaking his duck for Les Girondins is coming in, and I think that's important to see, given that neither Ricardo nor Poyet before him seemed to, or Eric Bedaway, his interim manager, seemed to really trust another striker in that role. I think Briand's importance is going to be really, really high for Bordeaux, both as they try to manage this. Yeah, I think it's a shame that Bordeaux started the season so poorly in the league, because it means they really can't focus the way they would like on the Europa League, because even with the draw today and having defeated Monaco 3 weeks ago, they're still in 19th place. So they can't afford to be derelict in terms of how they approach the league. And they've got some tough matches coming up as well. I think we've seen Lille have had a brilliant start to the season. Reims in 2 weeks, in the following week's fixtures, Reims have shown that they're going to be a very obdurate side for anybody as well. And I think it's a disappointment to me to see Bordeaux's poor start in the league. And I think that in the potentially negative effect we've had, I think that in an ideal world, this team would be comfortably within the top 6 as well again this season. But that poor start means that their priorities might have to take a back seat, which is a disappointing result given that they really impressed for my money in getting to the group stages. I don't think that a draw against Ghent, particularly in the playoff round, was any sort of a gimme. And I think that they really showed class and drive and determination in that way. So it's a shame that their league start could have this potentially negative effect on the way they approached it.
And let's hope that they can really pick up their form in the Europa League, because again, they struggled like last season really to even get in, and sort of embarrassed themselves. They've managed to push themselves through. It'd be a bit of a shame if it ends up being a damp squib for them as well. Let's finish off things with a topic I know you wanted to talk about a little bit, Eric, and that is Nantes, who slipped to a pretty boring, really, 0-0 draw earlier today, but it's only one win at the first 5 games with an interesting squad and a manager that a lot of people had a lot of hope for, but they haven't really hit the ground running.
Yeah, this is the third time I've seen not play this season. I also watched the win against Strasbourg before the break and the loss to Monaco as well. I just really question what Miguel Cardoso's endgame is here. This team seems like they're doing things right in a lot of ways. Certainly, they were disappointed to have lost Adrien Thomason and Leo Dubois, but I think that Kwarteng there was a natural replacement for Dubois, and Matt Miazga looks a pretty solid complement to Diego Carlos in defense. So I think that there's a good level of a good solidity in defense there, but then they brought in this bevy of attacking players. You've got Lucas Evangelista coming in from Udinese, Majid Waris, who people will remember from his time at Lorient, and you've got Anthony Limbombe signed for a club record, I believe, €8 million. Gabriel Boschilia is on loan from Monaco. So you have all these exciting attacking players. I mean, these are Boschilia before his injury from Monaco 2 seasons ago was really known for his free kicks, was tremendous talent. Limbombe has really impressed during his time in Belgium. And I think that so what you have there begs to be an attack-minded, forward-thinking side. Emilio Salas proved himself a capable goal scorer over a couple seasons now for Nantes. He's got, I think, 3 and 5 to start the season as well this season. Then you have this team lined up in this 4-3-3 that's very possession-oriented. You've got René Krin, the youngster Mutusami, and Rongier, whereas this team has to be set up in a more attacking way. I think they need to be playing a 4-1-4-1 or a 4-2-3-1, not this 4-3-3 with Rongier and Mutusami playing such deeper roles. If you've got all these attacking options, have Boschilia play as a 10, have Limbom and have Evangelista drop to play as part of the midfield too. He's certainly capable of doing that. He's got a lot of energy. Partner him with Rongier or have Crean play as a sole defensive midfielder, especially at home against Reims. Reims, I think, are going to be a real tough nut to crack for anybody this season. Very nasty and combative side, very physical, and I think that David Guillon has this side. Frankly, they might remind some of Nantes under Michel Dzekarian. But I think that they are a team that, given the money that Nantes have spent this offseason, believe they have an 11 million net spend, so quite a bit of money by their side. There was clearly an ambition on the part of the President Keita to make this team be a contender for Europe. The quality and caliber of player brought in would indicate that, but if Cardoso is going to play this style of possession-based football that doesn't have a level of sting, of venom, of finishing, that's gonna not give those attacking players that they brought in at no inconsiderable expense, I have to wonder what the point is. It's really frustrating to see because clearly these players are very talented. Waris had a poor match today, but Evangelista in particular looks a really strong play. We know what Valentin Rongier can offer as well. So why play with such a level of caution and negativity, especially at home against Reims, who again are solid but aren't world beaters?
Yeah, and it's disappointing to see them not really try and capitalize on getting rid of Ranieri and being less negative and trying to push on. It seems like they're still stuck in neutral, at least anyway. And on to our snapshots then, and I'll start with yourself, just to give Eric a little bit of time to think about his. Now, what's your moment from this weekend that our listeners need to know about?
I'm going to sort of cheat and go for a couple from the Nîmes match, Bordeaux-Nîmes. Nîmes have just been a fantastic best share, I think, so far this season. Really gave PSG a tough time in the last match and did brilliantly this time, coming from being 2-1 up and then 3-2 down and then fighting back for a draw at Bordeaux. So, and one of those goals that Nîmes' second was a fantastic free kick by Bobby Champ, which followed up. I think it was a fantastic shot against PSG as well. And then also just because of my mass bias, it was good to see Wim Bozok, who the last 2 years was top scorer in the National and Ligue 2, has maybe slightly struggled to take the step up to Ligue 1, but he came up with an assist and his first goal in Ligue 1 to get that draw. So really pleased to see Nîmes again, just taking everyone on sort of nose to nose and making a really good fist of it so far.
Eric?
Yeah, I wanted to express a little bit of frustration. Again, it's good to see PSG and good Nick ahead of their Champions League match, but why Jean-Louis Gasset felt the need to change things tactically is kind of beyond me. I mean, he played this 3-4-3 with Kolo, the left-sided center back alongside Perrin and Subotic. Again, Mathieu Debuchy is missing. Maybe he doesn't feel like he has an option as an orthodox right back. Gabriel Silva can do a job there. It's not as if Juan Bernat is going to strike fear into the hearts of the opposing defender. But trying to play Silva and Kevin Monet-Paquet as wingbacks, especially Monet-Paquet on the right side, I don't know. I think that the Saint-Etienne, that 4-2-3-1, even missing Remy Cabella, who would naturally be the 10 there, is a bizarre move. Have Khazri play as the 10, have Saliba play as the 10. Why change a formation going away to the Parc des Princes, especially given the lack of experience of Monet-Paquet and Gabriel Silva to play as orthodox wingbacks? It makes no sense, and I think that again, Saint-Etienne, had a great window. They brought in a lot of exciting players in Khazri, Saliba, Cabella permanently. This is a team that should be pushing for Europe. But to be humiliated at the Parc des Princes, even with a PSG on song, it just makes me have a little bit of doubt about Gasset's approach to this season. He had a formula that was successful last season. Why change it, even in the absence of Debuchy?
I think some people will at least give Ligue the benefit of the doubt that they always seem to give up at Paris Saint-Germain. Maybe they might pick it up next week. I think mine will go to Lille striker Nicolas Pepe grabbing a hat-trick, albeit with 2 penalties. So it does have that slight caveat, but maybe a good move in the end.
He did win both penalties, to be fair.
Yeah, so caveat that he had penalties, but caveat that he obviously won them as well. So credit to him. Good to get those goals, and he has had a strong start to the season as well. Even though Lille were maybe looking to see if they could get a little bit of cash for him to help boost things, but 4 goals, joint second top scorer along with Neymar and Mbappe isn't a bad thing, and Lille flying high in third with 10 points, a much different picture compared to last season, and he's been a big factor in it so far as well. That's all that we have for this evening. My thanks to Eric, Jez, Sam, and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the preview show on Thursday, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.